Right now, the U.S. job market is the weakest that it has been going all the way back to 2011. And this is no longer a temporary thing. In fact, a lot of the major banks in the United States are calling this the new normal because jobs are barely even being created anymore, especially at the entry level. And going into 2026, it's showing no signs of actually improving in any way. In fact, it may even get worse depending on how much more developed AI gets next year. And here's what's happening. The payroll growth has absolutely collapsed, okay? The average job creation over the past 6 months, think about this, is only 17,000 jobs per month, okay? That's the slowest pace going all the way back to the GFC. And those numbers aren't even the real numbers because every time we get the jobs numbers, it actually gets revised downward. So those 17,000 jobs on average being created over 6 months is actually lower once the revisions come in, and it's probably going to be actually worse than 2011 once we hit those revisions. When we look at the private sector, things do look a little bit better at an average of 44,000 jobs per month, which is still historically pretty low. And right now, the U6 unemployment numbers have risen to 8.7%, and job openings per unemployed worker have fallen to 1, which is the lowest that it's been since 2017. So on the surface, that might sound great. Yeah, there's one job available for every person looking for a job, but the type of jobs being created are very low quality jobs in many cases. They are entry level hospitality jobs, and a lot of people don't want those jobs because it's not enough to make a living off of, or you have jobs that a lot of people just aren't qualified for in the healthcare field. Those are really the two sectors of the economy where the most jobs have been created throughout all of 2025. And here's the thing, the stock market, no matter what kind of news we get, good news is great news and bad news is good news. But Bank of America just issued a warning about this, and they're saying that, listen, the stocks are at record highs right now, and investors are betting on a big, robust 2026 for the stock market. But Bank of America's warning says that, we can't continue to have a strong economy without job growth. That's unsustainable. That puts us in line to have a major problem. And to somebody like me, that just sounds like obvious and common sense. But apparently, this is not common sense because otherwise you wouldn't keep hearing this narrative that things are going great because the economy is still strong and the jobs market is not that bad and unemployment is still low. Same thing with these recent GDP figures, right? The third quarter GDP figures came out last week for 2025, and it said the economy grew by 4.3%, which was driven by an increase in consumer spending. And we know that basically all of that spending was driven by the AI bubble. But here's the problem. Real disposable income for households grew 0%, meaning that households gained no purchasing power whatsoever in the third quarter of 2025. In fact, I would argue that people are losing purchasing power when you factor in inflation rising quicker than wages right now. And just look what's happening with the price of gold and silver, guys. It continues to crush every other asset class out there, reaching all-time highs for the year. Like at the beginning of January of 2025, you could buy an ounce of silver for $30. You could buy an ounce of gold for around, $2,700, something like that. Fast forward to now, the end of the year, gold is over $4,500 an ounce, and silver has reached over $75 an ounce. Both of those assets have more than doubled in just the span of a year. And all of the spending that's happening in this economy right now is completely fake, like we talked about last week. All the spending is being supported by credit and people taking money out of their savings accounts and cutting down costs in other parts of their life so they can continue spending money on other things. It's not being driven by wage growth, and that's something else that's unsustainable. Think about it like this. If we're in an economy where a lot of people cannot find a good job after losing one, and people need to make more money than ever just to stay afloat and keep up with the cost of living, how are people going to make it in 2026? They're going to continue relying on more credit, going further and deeper into debt, and this is going to create big problems. You're going to see more personal bankruptcies. You're going to see business bankruptcies rise, even though 2025 was already a bad year for that. You're going to continue seeing the foreclosure numbers go up. Basically, everything that can go wrong is going to go wrong next year. And let's face it, we wouldn't be having any of these issues if we actually did have a strong job market, because in my opinion, a strong job market isn't necessarily how many jobs are available, but it's the quality of jobs. If people could get a job and work a regular 40-hour work week like people could do 50 years ago and live off of one income, the traditional middle-class lifestyle, and still have enough money left over after paying all the bills for some leisure and some fun and some savings, that's where we need to be to have a healthy job market. Until we return to that, it's never going to be healthy again. And with the way things are going, it looks like we're never going to make it there ever again. Those days are over. It's a bygone era of this country. We already know that AI is putting the squeeze on a lot of these companies too. I'm not going to go deep into that. We've already talked about that to death, but we know that companies are firing people in order to use AI and replace, hundreds of positions that people used to do. Even Goldman Sachs is warning that this current situation that we're in right now could become permanent. Like, this might just be the way that it is from now on. We might not ever see a recovery in the job market due to AI and due to all the advancements and where things are headed right now. Basically, outside of healthcare, every other sector of the economy is seeing flat or negative job creation right now, and that is not a sustainable thing. And then they say here that, the demographic shift is also exacerbating this issue because, less people are having kids these days, and you have, the aging people in the workplace and lower birth rates, which reduce the labor force growth. But the thing is, even if there were more people looking for jobs, that would put even more strain on the job market, right? There already are not enough good jobs for people who need them. If there were even more people looking, that would be a problem. And today I'm in Miami Shores again, walking near the waterfront that is being worked on near 94th Street. Now, they're saying that Gen Z is being hit the hardest with this current labor market, and I'm going to get into more details on that later on in this video because there's some interesting information that just came out about Gen Z. But the reason that they're getting hit the hardest is because there's fewer entry-level positions right now, and many of them just graduated from college with a degree in heavy amounts of student loan debt with no way to seemingly get out of it. And there's more competition because everybody's kind of wanting all those jobs all at once. A lot of employers these days, they don't want to train people. They want people who already have experience. And everybody out there that has a good job right now is hanging on to that job for dear life, and that makes the competition even fiercer. People who would normally maybe switch jobs or look for a better opportunity, or even people who just would normally retire, are hanging on to the job right now because of all the uncertainty in the economy. Whoa, check it out. We got a Waymo riding through the neighborhood here. No driver. It's coming to Miami. I see them all over California, but Miami's next. Now, here's what the banks like Goldman Sachs and Bank of America are predicting for 2026. They're saying we're not going to see a huge spike in unemployment, but what we likely will see is a long period of scarcity where jobs exist but are inaccessible. Either because you're not qualified or they're just jobs that don't really move the needle for people. And it just kind of makes me wonder how long the euphoria in the stock market can continue, guys, because I know that the layoffs are good news for the stock market. It helps share prices go up because it increases profits for a lot of these publicly traded companies. But at some point, this is really going to hit where there's going to be more job losses than we have people getting jobs. And people who even still do have a job are going to have a hard time paying for life with how much the cost of living is rising so quickly. And at some point, you would think that would catch up to these companies' earnings reports. You can only get away with firing so many people and increasing profits that way without substantially increasing your earnings. And the only way to increase earnings is to increase sales. But how do people continue to purchase your product or service if they just don't have any money? For now, They're doing it on debt, but how long can that last? Now, I said earlier we're going to talk more about Gen Z, right? And right now, Gen Z is being hit the hardest with this recession due to them not being able to find a job. Many of them who do have a job are living paycheck to paycheck, and they're spending a ton of money on rent. But interestingly enough, there's predictions out there that are saying that Generation Z is going to become the richest generation of all within just 1 decade from now, guys. So you guys are supposed to go from the hardest hit and poorest generation to the richest one in the span of the next 10 years. What do you think about that? They say that 2 years ago, Gen Z had about $9 trillion in income cumulatively. But they're saying by 2030, Gen Z as a cumulative total should be earning about 36 trillion. And by 2040, that number rises to 74 trillion. And this is according to Bank of America. And according to this data, it says that this will place Gen Z as the richest and largest generation by 2035. And this might feel like an impossible future considering Gen Z is having a hard time with the job market. In fact, unemployment for Gen Z rose 32% year over year as of February this year. And this isn't because they're not trying to get a job. It's just because they're overeducated and underemployed. Too many of Gen Zers went to college, got degrees, and now that they have graduated, they're looking for jobs that just no longer exist. You know, the economy combined with the advancement of AI has just moved faster than they could even get these degrees and are now kind of left sitting there wondering, what am I supposed to do next? Okay. 10 years from now, they're saying the whole narrative for that is going to change. The biggest contributing factor, the big change for Gen Z is the great wealth transfer, which is expected to hit Gen Z in the years to come. They're saying that there's going to be about $84 trillion in wealth passed down to millennials, Gen Xers, and Gen Z by just the year 2045. But I just have a warning for all the Gen Zers who might receive some sort of inheritance that can give you a leg up, is you better be working on your financial skills, not only to be able to earn more money, but also your saving and investing skills right now before you get that inheritance. Because just look what happens to all these people who win the lottery, guys. You know, people who had bad money habits before winning the lottery, pretty much all of them end up broke within the next 5 to 10 years. They spend it all and they're broke again. And the same thing can happen to all the Gen Zers who are not ready to receive that wealth transfer. But if you build up good financial habits now, you are going to be ready to receive that inheritance, and you're already probably going to be doing good by the time you do receive it. And then when you do, you can just kind of be set for life, right? That's the point in time in your life when things just got a whole lot easier forever if you set yourself up for success before. Because right now, a lot of Gen Zers are still out there doom spending. A lot of them still have 6 figures in student loan debt. You know, a lot of them are still spending on luxuries instead of saving up for bigger investments because they're trying to escape reality. You know, they're trying to feel like, you know, life is worth living and I deserve this. I'm going to buy all this now and not worry about it because I'm still young and have time. But that type of mentality will keep you broke no matter what kind of inheritance you get. So just think about that. And also, if you're sitting there wondering what you should be doing to try to get ahead in this economy right now, well, you might want to look at the trades, guys. You know, this is something I've brought up time and time again on different videos, but I found this story today of this guy that started off homeless and now ended up with his own business all because of the trades. So it's a great success story that can kind of outline how people can do this for themselves. Here's a guy from Jacksonville, Florida, who's 33 right now, and he has 6 kids. And he is the founder of a handyman / HVAC business in Jacksonville. And he says one of the biggest things that has helped him get to where he's at right now is just having patience, discipline, and seeing slow and steady progress in a world that's obsessed with speed and shortcuts. This is something else I talk about a lot on the channel. So many people want everything right now, especially younger generations. But the truth is, that's not realistic. Unless you just get lucky and win the lottery or get some big inheritance overnight, you're not going to get there overnight. Anything that's going to be worth doing is going to take time to build up. But just back in 2020, this guy was laid off during the pandemic and his entire financial life collapsed. He became homeless with his family, okay? He had 5 kids at the time, plus a wife, and he was just kind of floating between hotels and Airbnbs and friends' homes, wherever they could afford to stay at the moment. And over just the past 5 years, he rebuilt his entire life and started a business, and now is on track to have his first 6-figure year. And one thing that he says is that the US education system does a poor job preparing young people for real-world work. You know, schools used to have hands-on training like shop class. That's all largely disappeared. Even when I was in school, they did have that. I took both wood shop and metal shop when I was in school. Apparently that's gone now. And then, you know, once you graduate, or even, you know, well before you graduate, by the time you're 16 years old, they're already prepping you for college and telling you that if you don't go, that your whole life is going to be ruined and you're never going to make any money. So this guy never actually planned to work in the trades, but what happened is he found the Home Builders Institute, which provided training, mentorship, and job placement. And he trained in carpentry and then later on HVAC, and he slowly built his skills while working very long hours. At one point, he even worked 10-hour overnight warehouse shifts, then spent another 8 to 10 hours on his business, and he got basically no sleep, and his progress was still very slow. And that's like the grind behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see, right? Everybody just sees the success story now that, oh, this guy's doing well now, right? But they didn't see what it took to get there. I don't know how I never noticed this before over here, but man, that is a pink house. I don't think I've ever seen a house so pink. So what happened is this guy had a mentorship with an HVAC instructor, and that mentor believed in him so much that he actually bought him his first work truck, and that completely transformed his state of mind and gave him the confidence to move forward. And he likes to put out the message to young people as well that, listen, robots can't build houses, they can't do HVAC work, they can't do plumbing, they can't do electrical work. All of that requires a human to be physically present, have real judgment and hands-on problem-solving skills to get those jobs done. And, you know, AI can't even, you know, accurately give you proper information being pulled from the internet. You know, we're very far away from the days where it can do any of that stuff. And that's why going into the trades could be a great decision for young people thinking about what they're going to do right now. He also says that the trades carry a lot of stigma, but they shouldn't, because a lot of tradespeople actually have high IQs, but they just use a different set of skills than the white-collar workers. And the thing is, not everybody is meant to be a doctor or a lawyer or an academic, you know? I know I wasn't. That wasn't my path in life. I knew for sure I wasn't cut out for that even when I was a teenager. And likely you probably know that too as a young person. You know whether or not stuff like that interests you by the time you're 16 years old. So don't let anybody tell you, not teachers, not your parents or anybody else, that college is the only path to success, because that statement is less true than it's probably ever been going into 2026, because you need to be in a field that cannot be replaced by AI. You just have to be right now. What good is any college degree going to do you, no matter how prestigious it is, if your job doesn't exist anymore? And the thing that a lot of Gen Zers need to understand is that you can actually reach, you know, a 6-figure income with one of these blue-collar jobs. A lot of people believe that that's not possible, but it actually is possible. And it's also possible for you to start your own business and work for yourself in the trades. That can really explode your income if you choose the right business. Guys like this guy in the story started a handyman and HVAC business, right? Like here in Miami, that is just key, man. Like it is so difficult to find reliable handymen that can actually do the job, show up when they say they're going to show up, and do it properly and competently, that's a rare breed these days. And if you can bring your skills to places like this where they are in high demand because a lot of people just don't have those skills, and the ones that do are extremely short-handed, you can make a fortune. So I'm not telling you this, trying to tell every person who's Gen Z, you need to jump into the trades, but just know there's a lot of untapped opportunities still out there with this. And if you're sitting there thinking, I hate school, I don't really have a desire to go to college, but I'm not sure what to do, look into one of these things. Look into HVAC work, look into plumbing, look into being an electrician. Now, one last thing I need to talk about is what's happening with gold and silver, guys. I already mentioned that both of them have essentially doubled in price over the course of just this year. And what's really going on underneath the surface is this massive rise in the price of gold and silver actually shows us that there has been a structural shift away from the US monetary system, okay? And gold and silver are projected to rise even higher throughout 2026. I've been telling people for the last 3 or 4 years, you need to be buying gold and silver. Gold is projected to go up anywhere between 8 to 15% in 2026 from where it is now, okay? And silver another 20 to 35%. That is huge. The odds of seeing increases like that in your stock portfolio moving into 2026 are slim to none. Not saying it's impossible or it won't happen, but it's very unlikely. And the reason for these massive rises in gold and silver prices is because central banks across the world are shifting away from using US dollars as their reserve. More central banks are starting to realize that they need to have hard assets on hand in order to back up their currency. And ultimately, this means that the dollar is going to start falling in value relative to other currencies across the world. And that can be problematic for a whole host of reasons. Inflation is already bad in this country, making life unaffordable, but this will weaken the dollar even further and make the purchasing power of the dollar go down even more in 2026. Now, silver has gone up so much in price, not only because it does track with gold historically, but also there has just been an actual silver shortage, okay? There's been a physical shortage of silver that's needed for industrial demand. Things like energy and electronics and manufacturing all require a large amount of physical silver. And China just announced that they're going to be requiring export licenses for silver starting on January 1st, 2026, which means that this could put a huge silver squeeze on the entire world and everybody who wants to buy silver, and can tremendously push up the price. And just knowing this right now, a few days before January 1st, is your chance, guys. Like, I know 70-something dollar silver might sound expensive and crazy, but imagine what it's going to be next year if it does go up another 30 or 35%. I haven't stopped buying. FYI, I still buy it at today's prices, both gold and silver, just anybody wants to know. And then the Fed is expected to continue cutting rates in 2026, further increasing inflation problems as the dollar is losing more purchasing power compared to other fiat currencies. You know, low interest rates plus rising national debt and a weaker dollar is a literal perfect storm for gold and silver prices to go up. You can buy some Bitcoin too if you want to, but just look at what's happening with Bitcoin, guys. Bitcoin and the price of it have been coming down substantially. You know, it reached an all-time high of about 126,000 and now is sitting somewhere in the mid 80,000s, and it's not going back up along with gold and silver because it is not the same thing. It is still way more of a speculative investment than gold and silver is. Gold and silver is tried and true. Silver is needed in the industrial sector of the economy, and gold is used as a world reserve currency by central banks. Bitcoin is neither of those. And I'm not saying I hate Bitcoin because I do own some, but if I had to choose one, I would pick gold and silver all day over Bitcoin, guys. I would sell all of my Bitcoin in a heartbeat to buy gold and silver if I could only own one. That's just the reality. I'm going with history on this one, not with what maybe could happen in the future. And this isn't investment advice. I'm just telling you my opinion and how I feel about these things personally. You can do whatever you want, but just look at the hard facts right now. And especially if you price Bitcoin in gold, you know, the losses in Bitcoin have been tremendous over 2025, dropping about 50%. In fact, Pretty much everything is getting cheaper when priced in gold, and that's because inflation and the value of the dollar is a huge problem. And if you know that these things are not going to get any better in the future, then why not put some money into these precious metals? It's the only thing that makes sense right now, in my opinion. I'm not buying real estate. I'm not buying Bitcoin. I'm buying gold and silver. That's it. It's the only thing I believe as a hard asset is going to have a bright future ahead for now. So let me know what you guys think about all this. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.